Hey, comic book cats and kittens. It's time for another Ask Chuck Dixon. Yes, it's Wednesday morning, and I'm here to answer all of your questions, no matter how deeply geeky or strangely nerdy or oddly phrased. I'm here to answer questions about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books. And our first question is from Leah the Human. I've realized you've created two of my favorite comic book villains, Rosalie Carbone for Punisher, and you reinvented Firefly for Batman. I wanted to ask what went through your head for writing these two? How did you get such a phenomenal ideas for these characters? And for Firefly specifically, what inspired you to turn a loser of a villain into such a rich character? One that has his own interesting psychology, a great thematic connection to Batman, all while being a fun character and a genuine threat. I also want to ask what your thoughts are on him being killed off in New 52 and replaced with Ted Carson, who? A stalker who had no obsession with fire and incredibly rushed development while being a poor character, as well as the murky status of who's Firefly nowadays. Sometimes it's Ted, sometimes it's Garfield, is mysteriously the man behind the mask. If you take the time to answer any of these questions, I'd be happy. Have a great day, Mr. Dixon. Well, you're contributing to this great day, Leah, with that awesome question, and I mean it. I love questions like this about characterization. Now, Rosalie Carbone was part of the first arc in Punisher Warzone. She continued on to be a recurring character in the franchise. I don't know if that lasts till today. But she was the ultimate mafia princess. But not the mafia princess in that she was just living off of daddy's hard work as a thug. But she was a participant. She was a new woman. She wanted to be part of the family's planning. And she was smart. And she was capable. And mostly she was created so that Frank Castle could finally have something like a romantic interest. The Punisher had been around a while, and other than his dead wife, he didn't ever seem to have any interest in the opposite sex. And Mike Barron was the first one to bring this up and make me aware of it, that, Frank's still a man, he still has urges. How would he satisfy them? Mike had some pretty shocking ways in which that might happen that caused a few arguments in the Marvel offices and never saw the light of day. But I thought, well, here's an opportunity. We've got a storyline where Frank infiltrates the mafia, basically becomes a different person, masquerading. Perfect opportunity for him to get a little action, to meet some ladies. And the lady he meets is Rosalie Carbone. And I mostly created her, and she has a life in the television shows, apparently. Annabelle Sciorra played her on Luke Cage and was supposed to play her on the Punisher series. Maybe that'll happen if it ever comes back. But the idea behind Rosalie Carbone, I didn't want Frank to have a romance. Frank Castle does not need a Lois Lane in his life, a recurring thing. But I thought, well, one-off dalliance with a woman. And, of course, you don't want that woman to seem like a pawn or like Frank's using her. And so Rosalie Carbone is a femme fatale. And femme fatales, as we all know, they use men. They don't get used by men. So I thought this is a perfect situation where we get to show Frank's, softer side? Whatever. We get to see him in a man-woman love wreck situation, but I wanted a woman who he wasn't going to leave her heartbroken. He wasn't using her. He is pretending to be someone else. I didn't want him lying to someone who wasn't basically a liar herself. So Rosalie used him. He used her, and basically for other means, to find out about one another or whatever. She was in a power struggle and needed some muscle. He was infiltrating the mob and needed some information. So I thought it was she was purposely created as a love interest for Frank that made sense within the confines of the story and didn't seem creepy, or terribly creepy. As far as Firefly, Firefly was a character I was familiar with when I was a kid, and I think he only ever made one appearance, and it was lame. I thought he was even as a kid, I thought he was a really goofy villain. I mean, he's got this costume with antennas and an FF on his chest, as if, he really wanted people to know he was Firefly. So he's got an FF, and his power. He was a Hollywood special effects man, and his power was using light in ways that didn't seem terribly effective. Here we see Batman and Robin having to wade through a rainbow to get to him. Yeah, I mean, what? Oh, so along comes me and Graham Nolan, and we're taking over detective, and we're looking for villains, and I want to resurrect some old, lame-o villains like Calendar Man and stuff like that. And I landed on Firefly. I thought, Firefly, this is a perfect guy to reboot, because he was really, really lame in his first incarnation, never used again, as far as I know. And so I changed him. He was still a Hollywood guy, effects guy, but now it was pyrotechnics. And his modus operandi was he liked fire. And he was sexually attracted to fire. He was a real pyromaniac. Fire and smoke and things going up in flames turned this guy on in a big way. So major sicko. And gave him a different, cooler costume. Gave him the ability to fly for brief periods of time. And his radio set makes the antennas make sense now. And also he's in a Nomex suit. He's a scary looking dude. He's a scary looking dude in and out of the costume. He really is a creepy weirdo. And I thought, great Batman villain. Obsessed, thematic. And so we put him in there. I even had him kill his competitors. And there was another character called Firebug. And Firefly incinerates him to get rid of him. So, the only problem I had at the beginning was I would write in that, in his mind, the flames took on the shapes of women. To not explicitly, but implicitly imply that, this guy's got a problem with fire. He's a bit perverse. Most of the time, the editors, they didn't like that. A couple of times I was able to do it. I slipped that one past them. I thought it was harmless. It's an Air Force joke. If the kids don't get it, it just seems like guy's just a weird guy. But for the adults reading it, they'd realize, okay, yeah, this guy's classic pyromaniac. My only regrets about this character, because he really did take off. He became action figures. He was in the animated series. Apparently, he's been on one of the CW shows. I'm not sure, but he makes the rounds. He's part of the canon now, whereas he was forgotten before. The only regret that Graham and I have is we didn't rename him. Like the idiot geeky nerds that we were like, oh, we want to take Garfield Lynns and make him cool. So Firefly's cool again. But we don't get any money for that because he was an already existing character. We just dusted him off and polished him up. If we had renamed him, Firestorm, we would be getting royalty checks off those animated figures and appearances in movies and TV. But, live and learn. At heart, we're just fanboys. We didn't know what we were doing. Zango! I imagine that's how you pronounce that. Zango, it seems like one of those big Kirby monsters. Zango, the thing that devoured Detroit. I face Zango, the creature from somewhere else. Okay, the Batman 2020 film features the Riddler. I wanted to ask why he was portrayed as such a washed-up loser villain in the 80s and 90s. Did everyone at DC collectively decide to write him like that? Or did people not look at him as a criminal mastermind until years later? He was always the one main Bat rogue who always seemed like he was getting the short end of the stick in that era. Well, I like it when all the Bat rogues get the short end of the stick because they're the bad guy and I want to see them lose. I don't know how everyone else did the Riddler, because I don't think a lot of people were writing the Riddler. Because as I've said over and over and over again in these videos, the Riddler is not easy to write. And he is particularly not easy to write if you want to get it right. The Riddler appeared once, maybe twice in the late 40s. Completely forgotten villain. Wasn't a member of the main canon at all until the 1966 television show resurrected him. And it was real serendipity because they cast Frank Gorshin as the Riddler. And Frank Gorshin took this character and just, chewed the scenery, climbed the walls, went over the top. Just this nutty, manic character with this dark, brooding edge to him. And the producers of the show, the first episodes that aired were Riddler episodes, even though they weren't the first filmed, because the network and the producers realized that Frank Gorshin, whether he meant to or not, had set the tone for the entire series with his portrayal as the Riddler. It was just off the wall enough and just goofy enough, but with a tinge of the sinister enough that he defined how a Batman villain should be portrayed. And he did. And a lot. And see, they built upon the Riddler's original appearances, because his original appearances, he was a puzzle character. He was just about the riddles. There really wasn't much else to the character, except that he challenged Batman and Robin's detective skills. The series defines him more. That he's more manic. He's more driven. He's even more obsessed. And they set up the wonderful template that he leaves riddles. He's compulsed to leave riddles that either lead you to him or away from him, depending on your answers. And to me, I love this character. He became my favorite Batman villain. He still is my favorite Batman villain. And I dug writing the character. But I saw him as, a bit of a loser. He was always second banana to Joker, who's far more psychotic, far more dangerous. And I always saw Riddler, because he's an obsessive, is a rather a sad character. And my Riddler cheats. When I wrote Riddler, he cheated because he's a criminal. He wasn't so obsessed that he wanted to get caught. A lot of people wrote him that, well, he's doing this because he wants to get caught. No, he's doing this to show off his ego. And the reason why he needs to show off his ego is because his self-esteem is so low. He's got to build it up somehow. And if he can get Batman and Robin to run around town chasing him, then he's proven that he's the better man, even though in his heart of hearts he knows he isn't. And I think my idea of having him play a sort of a loser character with self-esteem grew out of the one thing in the Batman television show that I didn't believe or buy or understand, which was, how does a Looney Tune like this assemble a gang? And they always have he always has a gang. He always has henchmen. Who in their right mind would follow this guy? Number one, he's always failed. Number two, he's constantly threatening and belittling them. And number three, his range of emotions. I mean, he goes through like 5 or 6 manic depressive phases in a day. And Gorshin was great at portraying them, because Gorshin, in some storylines, he was like, off the wall crazy, laughing at his own jokes, totally obsessed with himself. And then other ones, he was darker and more brooding and more. It's terrific. It's just a really nuanced performance for what they probably called for was a real cartoonish portrayal. And although Gorshin's portrayal is cartoonish in the best sense of the word, it's also very deep. And he's a frightening character. To me, on the TV show, even more frightening than the Joker, because he does have such a low opinion of himself. You wonder, to what lengths would the Riddler go to succeed? So I always played him like, the pathetic loser. And he is a sad figure, and he never wins in the end. But then I also admire him for the cleverness and his devotion to his obsession and his ability to come up with riddles, which of course when I wrote him I had to come up with the riddles, but still it's like, well, this character's whole modus seems to be to keep Batman and Robin guessing and to keep the reader guessing. And written properly, a Riddler stories are some of the most engaging Batman stories ever written. So I mean, I don't know how he's portrayed now, but I preferred him. I thought it made him more relatable, that he was a guy who just couldn't win and had this one gimmick to prove himself. And even that fails. So, Dan Donovan. Jerry Conway has made no secret of his disapproval of the popularity of the Punisher's skull logo, particularly among members of the military and law enforcement. Marvel apparently agrees and is rebranding the character with a new logo. However, Conway and others do seem to think that his opinion carries more weight than others because he created the Punisher. Do you agree or disagree? And does it matter when a character achieves their greatest success under writers other than their creator? In the Punisher's case, he achieved much greater popularity when written by Stephen Grant, Mike Barron, yourself, and a bit later Garth Ennis than he ever did when written by Jerry Conway. In the world of work for hire, the creator really doesn't outrank anybody. I mean, maybe, you can homage and you can acknowledge that Jerry Conway created the Punisher. But let's remember that the Punisher was primarily a one-off Spider-Man bad guy in an age where Spider-Man was facing someone new practically every month. And the Punisher is very, very much inspired initially by The Executioner, Mac Bolan, The Executioner, a very popular series of paperback novels, that were huge sellers in the 70s. So Jerry was, it's no secret. I'm sure he freely admits that, that was his inspiration, that the Punisher is a Mac Bolan type, Vietnam vet obsessed with justice, but he turns him into basically the Punisher's a villain. He's in competition with Spider-Man to catch the Jackal, and in early Punisher appearances, he's very much is a villain rather than an anti-hero or a hero. And but does Jerry Conway have the right to tell everybody what to do with the Punisher? No, he doesn't have any rights at all. It's a work for hire. Marvel has the right. If Marvel's upset about military and police using it as a symbol, then they shouldn't have made the character so popular. So, I mean, what is that? It's a sign of the popularity of the character that military and law enforcement have adapted it. I'm sure the Batman symbol and Superman symbol have appeared just as often in the past. Probably not now, because I do see the Punisher sticker on the back of cop cars, and it's everywhere. I mean, I see it constantly when I'm out. So what are you going to do about it? And the Punisher did morph away from Jerry Conway's interpretation. I remember Punisher made an appearance in a couple of the Marvel magazines. I don't know if one or both written by Archie Goodwin, and it very much takes him in the direction of the Mac Bolan character, and it very much tries to turn him into a hero as opposed to a villain. And so it sort of morphs away from what Jerry Conway created. And that happens in comics, that you're going to find that people will build on your creation, especially if it's a creation that you didn't mean. I mean, I don't think Jerry Conway spent weeks and weeks and weeks thinking about the Punisher and thinking, he'll be, he'll have a TV series and a movie someday. No, it was just this string of bad guy of the month that were appearing in Spider-Man and Hulk and everything else. Remember, Wolverine is another one. Wolverine, one-off opponent for the Hulk. And now he's, pop icon, one of the biggest, most popular comic book characters of all time. So a lot of times these characters are created as afterthoughts or out of necessity. And so, the character was built beyond Jerry Conway's original creation into something much, much more than I'm sure he ever intended. And but that happens in comics. The other thing happens too. I mean, as many talented people who have worked on Plastic Man over the years, no one, and these creators will agree with me, no one will ever equal Jack Cole's original interpretation of the character. They will never equal the work that he put on, because he was the innovator, he was the man. He just did it best. Ditko's Doctor Strange is another one. No one's ever been able to equal what Steve Ditko did on Doctor Strange. The mood, characterization, the just innate weirdness of it has never been duplicated as effectively as Doctor Strange. I mean, in other words, no one's ever done a Plastic Man or a Doctor Strange story that would make you forget the originals. Whereas with the Punisher, Mike Barron and I come along to make you forget Jerry Conway's Punisher, and then Garth Ennis comes along and makes you forget me and Mike. So that's just the way it happens. That's just the evolution of comics. But does the creator outrank everybody? Contractually, no. Unless you had a piece of it, unless you had ownership. But he can say what he wants. It's his opinion. This is America. For now. Solove. I don't know. I apologize. I am really enjoying the My Sister Suprema comics. Those are on ArcTunes, by the way. Google it. Free, digital. My Sister Suprema comics. I look forward to every new chapter. Thank you. I have a question about the plot that really bothers me. If Randy has successfully created a recipe to turn someone into a superhero, and it's his dream to become a superhero, why did he stop trying to turn himself into one? Yes, My Sister Suprema is about Randy Diaz. He's a little boy, 10, 11, and he finds a formula for superpowers on a website, a mysterious website, and he tries to duplicate it, but unfortunately, instead of himself gaining superpowers, his big sister, who has no interest in being a superhero, gains superpowers. And Randy has to deal with that. He has to school her on how to be a superhero, which she's not really that thrilled about, and live vicariously through her. So why doesn't Randy recreate the experiment? Several reasons. He needed a cell phone, and he destroyed his sister's, and he's not about to take mom or dad's cell phone. And also the experiment destroyed the family bathroom when it happened. And, there's just a lot of variables here. To Randy, it also, this isn't in the strip, it's in my head. To Randy, it also looks like it hurt. And he needs the proper conditions. He needs the chemicals, which is, it's hard for an 11-year-old to get those chemicals back together. And he needs a predictable oncoming lightning storm. Thankfully, he lives in Central Florida, where the lightning capital of the United States. But still, lightning doesn't strike every day. So yeah, and the thing is that this is a question left unanswered in the strip, because obviously Randy's going to start thinking about that down the line and think, I am so sick of my big sister lording it around as Suprema that I'm going to get my own superpowers, and that will lead to further complications down the line. So we will have, as part of Cecilia's ongoing origin story, we will have Randy's own struggles with trying to join his sister in the pantheon of the superpowered. So good call, good question, and thank you for reading the strip. JM During Mike and Carl and your Punisher runs, was it you as writers who selected what guns and other weapons Frank would use in plots? You're assigned to artist, or given the Punisher armory was in full swing during the period, Elliot R. Brown? Also, once weapons were selected, how did you all go about working out the scenes for their use, and what was the process for ensuring your artists got their visual portrayals correct. I love this question because it's about guns. Yeah, the Punisher uses real guns. He uses real weapons. You can't make them up because the people that read the Punisher will go, well, that's a phony baloney weapon. And also, when the weapon's used, it has to be used properly because that's what the Punisher is all about. Proper use of firearms. If you don't use your properly use your firearms, you're not going to kill as many criminals as you set out to take off the street. So, the writers, especially the ones you're talking about, Mike Barron and Carl Potts, the weaponry was important. Now, my own background is my dad was a gunsmith. He was a computer technician, but he was also a gunsmith on weekends to raise extra money. My dad always had 2 or 3 jobs at once. And he's very talented at making new parts for vintage weapons and things like that. And he had a lot of business. He had a little workshop down in our basement. And consequently, lots of guns came in and out of the house. I mean, from a very, very young age, I was surrounded by guns everywhere. Shotguns, rifles, handguns, whatever. And in various states of disassembly and repair. And my dad had a gun collection of his own. And he had a very positive attitude toward firearms. I owned a rifle before I had a bike. So if that's any indication of what it was like around our house. And but it was all very, very responsible. And guns were not toys. They were not playthings. But consequently, as well as guns everywhere, there were publications everywhere. My dad was a regular reader of Shotgun News, which was kind of the comics buyer's guide for gun owners. It used to be a big tabloid newspaper crammed full of advertising. And you'd see ads for, gun parts and magazines and ammunition and all kinds of stuff. And inside were, tons and tons of pictures of weaponry and parts. And, I learned a lot just looking through these as a kid. My dad also had a library of the Shooter's Bible. He had dozens and dozens of volumes. And what the Shooter's Bible would be, it was like a year-end review of all the new weaponry that had been manufactured that year for civilians. And each weapon was reviewed and then shown in an exploded view that showed all of the parts. And you can see where that would be vital to a gunsmith. So if he needed to make a part, he could find the proper Shooter's Bible edition and see the gun and see every part of it and be able to make a new part for that gun from the spec sheet. And I look through these things all the time just to see, what was available, where these guns were manufactured, what they looked like. I mean, just, you're a kid. You're just looking at stuff. You're curious. And so I just sort of absorbed a lot of this stuff by osmosis. So it really was up to us to find what weapon we wanted to use. The Punisher Armory kind of came later in the game. And in a lot of cases, Elliot was doing an awesome job on these books. He did all the research and the artwork and everything else. And he would try to use guns or explain guns or give the specs to guns that the Punisher had already used. Then he began introducing, all kinds of new weaponry. And the 80s in particular was great because there was a lot of new, like almost garage band gun manufacturers entering the business. And people were more and more interested in military hardware, semi-auto versions of automatic military weapons and stuff like that. So there was a lot of ready reference, tons and tons of gun magazines at the time. And I would buy these magazines just to primarily look for new weapons for Frank to use. And when I was done with them, because I didn't need them anymore for visual reference. I mean, if I found a gun in a magazine, I would just send the magazine to the artist. Here's the gun I'm thinking about, with the page marked. And I still to this day have a couple of artists I've talked to who I worked with back then, and they'll go, I have a bunch of gun magazines you sent me. I got to get them back to you someday. And I'm like, no, they're yours. Keep them. I don't want 20-year-old gun magazines back. I mean, it's not worth, you can use them for further reference. But it was important to send, as much reference as possible. I tried to send pictures of each gun from as many angles as I could, to help the artist figure out what these things were. And I also encouraged anybody who worked on the Punisher to go to a shooting range at least once. If you've never fired a weapon, go fire one at a shooting range. You can rent weapons and fire them, and it gives you more of a feel for the body language and the overall environmental effect the discharge of a weapon has, what it looks like, what it feels like, and you'll be more conversant with it. And I don't know how many of them took my advice, but I sent out tons and tons of gun magazines. And a lot of times they were like these gun annuals with multiple weapons in them. Or if I wanted to keep the rest of the magazine, I would just tear the page out and mail it. But I've always been a big advocate of, if you're asking somebody to draw something, help them out with a visual reference. I mean, you're the one who picked this thing out for them to draw, so why not give them a hand? And plus, I wanted it to look accurate. Now, on one of the strangest things that happened was I was reading in a gun magazine about a brand new experimental single-shot 50 caliber rifle, which was supposed to be a sniper rifle. This is before the development of the Barrett 50 caliber, and it was a single shot. You loaded one bullet in at a time, and I don't know if you've ever seen them, but a 50 caliber round's about as long as your forefinger, all the way back to the base of your thumb. It's a big round. And I thought, man, I gotta have the Punisher use one of these. I mean, he could hit a guy from 2 miles away with this thing. So I found the phone number for the manufacturer, and it was a Mahdi Griffin single shot 50 caliber. Never heard of the company. So I call them. I call Mahdi Griffin Incorporated, and this woman answers, and she's not a receptionist. There's kids crying in the background. It sounds like she's got a kid on her hip, and I'm picturing this woman standing in her kitchen, and I think, do I have a wrong number? I said, I'm calling for information on the Mahdi Griffin 50 caliber single shot. She goes, oh, that's my husband. He's not here right now. Can I take down your name and number? And I said, yeah, okay. And then she said, did you want to order one? And I said, well, no, I want to use one in a comic book called The Punisher. And she said, oh, well, okay. So she writes my name and number now. And 20 minutes later, I get a call back from this guy. He's in his garage shop where he makes these things. He made these things, they weren't mass produced. He would assemble them on order. And this guy was just thrilled that I was going to have the Punisher use a Mahdi Griffin, which I did. I eventually did. And I said, look, what I need is photographs and things like that. And this guy took a whole bunch of pictures and sent them to me. And I said, I need the specs and all the rest of it. And he was very, very helpful. And then I sent him copies of the comic when it came out. But he was thrilled. But I did that a number of times on the Punisher. Talk to gun manufacturers and gun makers for an issue where the Punisher gets thrown out of an airplane. I went and talked to a guy who ran a parachuting school, because I want to know exactly what would happen as the Punisher in midair tried to take a parachute off another guy, how long he would have, stuff like that. So that's was one of the fun things about doing the Punisher, because he is more of a real world character than, say, the Fantastic Four or Superman. The fun was, finding out about this stuff and getting it right, and then providing the visual material to the artists. So, awesome question. I love that question. Dwayne Thomas, given the reality of what has happened in the sadly failed war on terror, in the years since CrossGen backed down from publishing American Power, would there be any reasons, legal or otherwise, preventing you from revisiting the idea and doing it today, possibly through crowdfunding? Would you be up for the project? Do you think it would be financially successful? Well, yes and yes to the last two questions. I would be up for it. I do think it would be financially successful. Not as successful as it would have been in the day when the issue was really hot. But it's impossible to do because Disney came in and for pennies on the dollar bought everything CrossGen had, including things that were in development. So they own American Power, which means it'll never see the light of day, as in our lifetimes. It's going to the mouse, and there won't be any reproducing it. Yeah, it's not something I can revisit, sadly, and the material won't be used anywhere. But thank you for bringing it up again. Primarily for the reason that I can once again thank everyone who contributed to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital in exchange for the American Power Master File, which that offer is still open. I will send you the American Power Master File, which has the scripts for the first 2 issues, some cover art, and some interior art, all by Greg Land. And I'll send that to you. All you have to do is go to St. Jude's and give them a few bucks. Give them $5. And a lot of you over the Christmas holidays were very generous, and I very much appreciate it. St. Jude's is a terrific outfit. It's a terrific charity. Every cent that you send them goes to help children who are in desperate need of medical care. And St. Jude's has saved thousands upon thousands of children's lives and never sent a parent a bill. It's a purely charitable organization founded by Danny Thomas, and they do wonderful work. They are miracle workers. So if you want to help them out, my offer still stands. I'll send you the American Power Master File. Not done yet. Jacob Posch, you're from Germany. I'm guessing Posch. I recently read Winterworld for the first time, and I just have to wonder, out of all the animals Win and Scully could have as a sidekick, how the hell did you come up with a badger? Not that I wouldn't like it, it just seems weird. Probably partially inspired by Mike Barron's Badger. I wasn't really aware of badgers until Mike and visiting in Wisconsin, where you cannot escape badgers. They're everywhere. Not the animal, but the symbol. And so I wrote a badger as the sidekick, rather than a dog or something else. And badgers seem to flourish in the winter. They seem to be a wintry type animal, sturdy, hardy, tough critter that could survive in almost any environment. And so I wrote a badger into Winterworld. What I didn't know is that Jorge Zafino would use a European badger instead of an American badger. I didn't even know about European badgers. And when the artwork came back, I was like, this isn't like any badger I've ever seen. I love it. I love the look of it. Badger's name is Ra-Ra, by the way. I love the look of the badger. But I questioned Jorge, this isn't an American badger. He said, no, it's a European badger. These things are running through the forests of, Germany and northern Italy and places like that. And I was like, well, that's awesome. There's no reason why Scully couldn't have one of them. So that really is, the origin of Ra-Ra. I just thought it would be cool to have something other than a dog as a mascot or sidekick or whatever. And then they are intelligent creatures, and like I said, they're extremely hardy. So they would be able to survive on a planet totally frozen over. Again, Jacob has another question. As a writer, do you come up with names? How do you come up with names to your characters? Do you just randomly throw a few names together hoping they might sound good, or is there a deeper process behind it that I just can't see? I think simplicity is the best guideline when it comes to creating characters, because you want to create character names people are going to easily remember. I always object to these phony made-up sci-fi names. I mean, Han Solo is such a great name for that character. If he was called, Tavlot Tan, we wouldn't even remember his name. It's like Edgar Rice Burroughs' initial name for Tarzan was Tublat Zan. Was it 2 words? It's like, thank God he came up with Tarzan. Even though it was a nonsense word, it's memorable. It's simple. It has all the right sounds in it. I never really thought about characters' names until I read an essay about the film White Heat. White Heat is a 1949 crime film starring James Cagney. It has the iconic ending, "Look at me now, Ma, top of the world." It's a terrific action crime story if you've never seen it, and Cagney gives a bravura performance in it. It's his best performance as a criminal, bar none. And but in the essay, they talked about how American the film was, how it used real environments, and there was a feeling of immediacy because it seemed to be happening right now in the world we live in, in 1949. And they said that one of the things they liked about it was there was nothing fanciful about the movie. It was very grim and it tried to be as realistic as possible. And one of those aspects was in the naming of the characters. And this is something I never really thought of. And they said the names of the characters are so simple, but they're elegant and memorable. Names like Roy, Het, Bo, Big Ed. I mean, you're not going to forget their names. I mean, Cagney's name in the movie is Cody Jarrett. What a great name. You're never going to forget that name. And so, I was just a, young kid with a dream when I read this essay, and I'd seen the movie a number of times. And it gave me a whole new way of thinking about how to name characters. And just keep it simple, keep it memorable. And Larry Hama always had a guideline when naming characters was making it fun to say. He had a recurring Conan villain called Barak al-Shak, and he was convinced that the readers loved it because it's so much fun to say Barak al-Shak. So it's just a way, and there's other rules like you want to have a hard K sound if it's a heroic character, things like that I really can't go into because I'm not that conversant with all of those theories. I do remember the hard K sound, but it's great if you have a rhythm to the name, or the name implies something about the character's appearance or motives or whatever. So I mean, I came up with the name Levon Cade for my character. It has the hard K. Levon, because it's a biblical name. Biblical names always work well, and I thought it said something about the character. And so, a lot of thought goes into naming the characters because you're stuck with them. I've said again and again, I named Bane by looking in the thesaurus. And this was the 90s. This was a time when the inclination in comics were to have bifurcated names, like Shadow Warrior, things like that, and they're all utterly forgettable names. And I came up with Bane because I thought it's simple, it's easy to remember. He looks like a Bane. He is a Bane. He is evil. And even though my editors hated the name initially, it stuck right to this very day. So yeah, you gotta put thought into it because you don't want characters that nobody's gonna remember. Because when you're reading a story, I mean, I've had that happen with. I'll have my editor say, in this novel you have two people and their names are too similar, like they both begin with an E, and you're going to confuse readers, so you have to change the name, which word programs make so easy. Just replace the name. Then all I have to do is remember that I changed it within the next book. So there's my guidelines for names. Hey, if you want that American Power Master File, BrunoBookstore@gmail.com is where to contact me once you've donated to St. Jude's. BrunoBookstore@gmail.com is also the place where I look for your questions, comments, whatever it is that you want to send me. And that is the place, BrunoBookstore@gmail.com. And if I may, travel over to Amazon when you're done here and take a look at the new paperback edition of Snakehand by myself and John Morgan Neal, and the follow-up novel La Gringa, which came out just a few weeks ago. That's the second Sidewinders book. I'm working on the third one right now. La Gringa is these are both westerns, obviously. La Gringa is about a British heiress who accompanies her father to the wild American West in search of dinosaur bones, because he is an amateur paleontologist, and their search takes them deep into Apache country. Both of these novels were rejected by their initial publisher as being too violent. So these two books are published by Castalia House, and they put together a couple of really nice illustrated paperback editions with illustrations by Gary Quapis. So, and it will be available on Kindle soon if it is not at the time this video drops. So that is it for me this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for helping me spread the word about Ask Chuck Dixon. And I will see all of you down the road.